Christmas come early here on the Matt Barrie Show, ESPN College Football YouTube channel. That is because Paul Finebaum joining me for some midweek pre-bowl game, post-transfer portal, anything you could want fun for us to just to discuss college football. Paul, how have you been since Selection Day?
Really great, Matt. Have heard from a few thousand of your closest Florida State friends. I see your name in the mentions quite often, so I don't feel nearly as bad.
No, and you think that if we were getting it bad, I mean, Herb Street is getting it pretty. I mean, it's been those FSU Twitter streets aren't to be walked alone.
Well, listen, they have a legitimate gripe that is now in the hands of the Florida Attorney General and the senators and the governors and who knows who else. But I appreciate their passion for college football, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this: that is a passionate fan base who sees the 13-0 record and they don't want to let it go, which I would get. If it was Arizona State, I would be just as fired up. But look, end of the day, I don't want to call it a consolation prize because it's not. The Orange Bowl against Georgia, that's going to be a damn good football game by two really good football teams. Normally in any given year, you print that T-shirt and you're like, wow, this is a really good game. And looking at both rosters, I don't think many have had many opt-outs. I mean, I know Johnny Wilson, receiver for Florida State's opted out. I know Georgia had a couple guys going to portal, but all things told, Paul, as we get set for bowl season, we're in line for pretty good matchups, and the first full slate gets started on Saturday.
Yeah, no, listen, it's like anything else in sports or news. We only have one time for one story in every cycle, and this has been the continue. What's really interesting about the Florida State thing, Matt, before we move on, is the amount of people talking about it and stopping folks like us who have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. I mean, I don't mind the passion of Florida State fans, but this thing transcended sports, where I went to a Christmas party Friday night in our neighborhood, and a lady, they're from New York. I've lived there for 10 years. I think I've spoken to her twice. My wife knows her, so that's how we got invited. I walked in, and she goes, "Oh, Paul, I saw you on Morning Joe Monday talking about the Florida State situation." I go, "Well, thank you." She said, "How in the world can you take that opinion? Those poor kids got denied. They were robbed of an opportunity of their lifetime." And I'm like going, "I'm a guest at your house." And I wanted to say, "Could you tell me the name of the Florida State coach or the quarterback who got her?" Matt, there's no chance she would know either one, but she just knows because she was watching MSNBC for whatever reason and happened to see me on there because Scarborough is an Alabama fan and a graduate, as you may or may not know or care. And they did a segment on it and I mean, and I've run into that everywhere I go. People, they just want to fight about it because they really feel like this was the bad news bears in Little League, and somebody stole their trophy and ruled them ineligible because they brought Snoopy along to the final game.
Yeah, and I just so badly, I was on Danny Cannell and Dusty Dvorak's radio show this morning, and I so badly just want to have just a good football conversation about it. I have been as honest as I can be. They are 13-0. You cannot. That is not easy to do in Power 5 college football. I believe, and I've said this before, they got hosed. Florida State, based on the resume, got screwed. But it's a 4-team playoff with 5 Power 5s. Yeah. And if you want to blame someone logically, which that's what makes the sport so great, because logic a lot of times doesn't go into it. But if you want to blame someone for this, blame the Pac-12. Well, why, Matt? Why would you blame the Pac-12? Because they've been virtually irrelevant the entire college football playoff era. Save for Oregon once and Washington once, they've been completely irrelevant. So the committee's gotten away with it. The committee's gotten away with 4 conference champions for pretty much the decade of this 4-team playoff. They've had it easy. Well, this is the first time they've had to deal with 5 qualified Power 5 champions. And I think that's why we're where we are with the outrage, because now all 5 Power 5 champions were relevant.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other reasons for it. And I I don't want to rehash anything that's already been rehashed, but I think it's gotten to a point though where even beyond that, and yeah, I mentioned when we last got together about the alliance and a lot of blowback about there was a reason they didn't want to do all that. It didn't. None of that matters. They didn't do it. And had they done it, Oregon would be in, Ohio State would be in, obviously Florida State would be in, and we'd really have an amazing playoff. But that will happen next year. But what I do object to, Matt, is the political part of it. I mean, I don't mind the neighbor, because she'll move on to the next lost cause. But the idea that people are taking these politicians seriously, and the Florida Attorney General came out the other day, and the first thing she said, "I'm a Gator fan, but." Now, Matt, if you're the state attorney general of Florida, I know you spent some time down there, so it's your state, not mine. Why would anything be more important than getting to the truth and pursuing the law? That is your job. You're the state's highest ranking law enforcement official, and she because she's a craven political hack, she lowered it to the most minute common denominator by bringing fandom into it. I'm a Florida fan, but I have your back, meaning that this is completely bogus. I'm probably going to run for governor next time around, so I'm trying to get my chips in from the state legislature, and after all, that is in Tallahassee, where the state capital is, and that bothers me. All the other stuff, take with a grain of salt. I mean, the governor earmarking $1 million for the cause. This is why people distrust politicians. This is why people laugh at Washington and your state capital. But there are legitimate people who really believe that they're going to get inside that CFP room and get a camera that was rolling, like the CFP hasn't already thought about that. By the way, I would love transparency. I know you would too, but we're not going to get it because it's a completely bogus case.
No, and as far as the transparency, I think, yeah, I mean, we would like to know, and I'm not defending the committee, but when they said, we had to choose and one of the teams was not at full strength and that factored in, to me, that appeared to be transparent. To me, that was them telling us why they didn't choose an undefeated Florida State team when they said they weren't the same team without the quarterback. That's the why. Now, yeah. I know Florida State fans disagree with it, but to me, and then the week before, when Bill Hancock said, look, most deserving isn't in our lexicon. Like, that's not in our vocabulary. Well, he was basically setting it up for that. And so I get it. They want transparency, but I mean, we've all been in the mock committee. There's no like emails or anything. They sit there, they point and they click, and the committee chairman came out and told us why they left Florida State out. Well, that seems pretty transparent. So I don't know. Look, I get why they're upset. I would be pissed off if it was my school. I would be pissed. So I get it. But
But Matt, what I do object to, though, is the idea that Alabama didn't do anything or Georgia didn't do anything. I mean, to me, that's where some of this has been lost, where, Florida State deserved to be in, but Alabama didn't. And I'm not coming from an SEC standpoint. I think Alabama pretty well punched its ticket that Saturday afternoon in Atlanta. But and by the way, no one needs to cry. Don't cry for Argentina for Nick Saban and his team. I mean, they've had some breaks over the years. I mean, they have twice won a national championship without winning its own division in the SEC. So, one I think was in the BCS era, one was in the CFP era. So right. They've caught some breaks. But this year, doesn't matter whether they beat Auburn on a 4th and 31 or not. They still did, and then they did what they had to do.
Where do you weigh? There's a story out there, not like printed, but a story developing that I think is worth watching because there's no end game to it yet. There's no finality of like it's over, because I find the Jim Harbaugh situation really intriguing at Michigan, because we know he's back on the sideline. The suspension was served. He's in the college football player for the third consecutive year. He's got an extension that's out there, allegedly, that the university was working on. It hasn't been signed because of a report that says he needs to sign something that says he won't flirt with the NFL anymore. Paul, the timing of this is going to be really, really intriguing come playoff Jan 1, and when the NFL executes their day after the season firings, and how much he's going to be involved in that.
Well, think about this, Matt. How many times has some average coach got an extension and the reason is for recruiting? Well, we're sitting here on Thursday, 6 days before the national signing day. Wouldn't that be the time where you would do all the bells and whistles and say, we've just signed Jim Harbaugh? And that's not happening because he clearly, and his people clearly don't like what they're seeing. And I don't I'm not an NFL insider. You talk to enough of them every week, but his name is pretty prominent for a couple of jobs, and he's hot. Jim Harbaugh is a hot name. I don't know where Belichick lands in all this. Somebody will probably take a flyer on him, but those are the names. I'm not talking about the cookie cutter Eagles coordinator that gets to a Super Bowl and you don't even know who they are, but they're getting jobs somewhere. That's the way but every once in a while you get an NFL owner who says, you know what, I don't want that guy. I want the big fish, and there are a couple of those guys out there. And Harbaugh, I live in Carolina. Sadly, I'm subjected to the Carolina Panthers every week, and you literally couldn't pay anyone to go to a game right now. Bryce Young, I hate to say this because I really admire him and like him very much, but he's almost a punchline in this community where you bring Jim Harbaugh in, and that would excite people. They would go, whoa, okay. And getting to the playoff helps Harbaugh. So I think he's, in spite of everything that everyone has said, and I've been nipping at that trough as well, Jim Harbaugh is a very hot name in the NFL. And I can't believe Harbaugh will ever be hotter. And for a guy that clearly has wanted to go back to the NFL twice now, we've seen this every year, I can't imagine why he wouldn't, as opposed to staying at a place that's putting a bunch of clauses in a contract that he frankly probably doesn't want any part of.
He's beat Ohio State 3 years in a row. He took San Francisco to a Super Bowl in his time there. And I think that's the difference with Harbaugh. I think the days of the Urban Meyers and like a Dabo Sweeney or someone making the leap, those are pretty damaged in that we've seen it not work more times we've seen it work. Now, Pete Carroll's different because Pete Carroll started in the NFL, came to college at USC, went back to the NFL, had success, won a Super Bowl. Jim Harbaugh, same thing. Started in college, succeeded in the NFL famously, and then came back to college to where he's kind of one of those guys that until he says I'm done in the NFL, if you're an NFL owner, you're always going to go kick those tires. He was a legend in Chicago. That job's probably going to come open. Jim Harbaugh with the Chicago. He's just a guy that's always going to come up.
And that, obviously we love college football. That's why we're sitting here talking about it. But college football is headed toward an iceberg. We all know that. We hear it from the leaders, and he doesn't look like the kind of guy that really wants to be dealing with this. He's said some pretty creative things, and I think he's genuine when he talks about believing in the player. He's not like a lot of these guys that are they mouth that, and then they're trying to protect their fiefdom. So I think with his brother already very successful, I could see him just saying, people say, well, it depends on whether he wins or not. I don't really think that's a big deal. Michigan getting to the CFP is a big deal, win or lose, and they're a slight favorite to win it all. He's already beaten the house.
Right. And we'll see now the timing of it, because it always comes up in the college football calendar. Speaking of calendar, you guys had an SEC schedule reveal show on ESPN, 2 hours of fun and schedule reveals. It was a big deal just because Texas and Oklahoma are entering the league next year. What was your biggest takeaway from the schedules that we saw coming in next year?
Matt, how many monster games Texas has? I mean, it was in a way. I know part of the idea was to promote Texas and Oklahoma, but I mean, it started with the Michigan game early in the season. They have Oklahoma. I mean, in any year, Texas Oklahoma is always going to be one of your top 5 games. Texas Michigan could be a repeat of the national championship game, and then Texas goes to Arkansas. I was there 2 years ago. Matt, you have no idea how big a game that is to Arkansas. Texas, Georgia, in mid-October on the same weekend as Formula One is in town. So is Prince Harry going to drop by the game and hang out with Matthew McConaughey? And then the game against A&M. That was, remember when Texas announced it was coming into the league? I mean, A&M's, they were not going to have anything to do with it. And in return, the report is that they got that game, first game in Kyle Field. I mean, I was just astonished how many times I saw Texas up there where that is the game of the year 4 or 5 times for a fan base.
And we like Sark. We like what he's building there at Texas, and we think it's only a matter of time. But basically what they're going to learn quickly is that Alabama game that you went to Tuscaloosa and did last year, or this season rather, that was the win of the year. You got to do that the following week, and then you got to do it again the next week, and then you got to do it again the next week. And you might get an off week with people might thinking, Mississippi State's an off week, or South Carolina, or what. There isn't an off week in that league. There isn't.
No, and that's really why when you think about what Kirby Smart did for 3 seasons, running through the SEC without a loss in the league until the championship game twice is really remarkable. Because I remember when the SEC went to divisions in 1992, Gene Stallings' team was undefeated at Alabama. He said, "This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I mean, we just went undefeated, and in any other year we'd be playing for the national championship, and now we got to go play a 3-loss Florida team that is desperate." And they almost lost the game. It took an Antonio Langham interception at the end of the game for a pick 6 to win. I mean, but there have not been many undefeated SEC teams. Saban has. This year he was undefeated in the SEC, but that is a rarity.
Yeah, look, end of the day, when you look at adding both Oklahoma and Texas, they did it because it's good for business, but they're going to look at their schedules and be like, oh, hell, what did we just do? Well,
no, we just talked about one school, but that opening weekend, you got LSU and SC in Vegas. There's an endless number of great games, and there's nowhere to hide. And Georgia, for all the criticism of them this year, they didn't play a big time team. They're getting paid back. And I thought one of the most remarkable things, Alabama normally plays Mercer the week before the Auburn-Alabama game. This year, they go to Norman, Oklahoma.
Give me something.